For Eric J on Sports, I'm Eric J, and this is what I think. Lately, the biggest story in sports is not a story about games that take place on the field or on the court or in an arena. The biggest story in sports is about a disgruntled former player who seems to feel as if the world is underrating him, his talent, his ability, and his accomplishments. Now, anybody who follows team sports, or anybody who follows sports in general, could think that I would be talking about practically anybody. But if you've been following sports for the last few weeks and months, then you know that the person I'm talking about is none other than Scott Maurice Pippen Sr., otherwise known as Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen is upset for a lot of reasons. The Last Dance, the documentary that was supposed to be about the 1998 Chicago Bulls team that won the last of their 6 championships, and then before the team was disbanded, the documentary seemed to be a chronicle of the life and career of Michael Jordan, leading to his retirement, his return, the second three-peat, and then the final run. And Scottie is a little upset at that because he seems to think that he and his Bulls teammates were kind of understated while the whole documentary was about Michael Jordan. Even going so far as to say, how is it fair that Michael Jordan was paid $10 million for this documentary when the rest of us participated in the documentary and didn't receive a dime for our participation? Well, Scottie, I'll answer that question before I'll go any further. The reason Michael Jordan made $10 million on that documentary is because he was one of the producers of the documentary. And the reason the documentary seemed to shade heavy towards Michael Jordan was because Michael Jordan was one of the producers of the documentary. And when you're one of the producers, it's your vision. And he was paid for his vision. He was paid $10 million because that was the deal that was struck. Now, if you were asked to participate in the documentary, you had every right to go to your agent and say, "Hello, agent man or agent woman. ESPN wants me to participate in this Last Dance documentary, and I would love to participate in this documentary and speak my side on things, but I would not do so unless I'm paid." In which case your agent would go back to ESPN and the production companies involved with the documentary and say, "Scottie wants to participate, but Scottie needs to be paid." And then Scottie would be paid, or Scottie wouldn't participate. And however that went, whether you were paid to participate or whether you were not participating, at least they would know where you stood. So if you're upset that Michael got paid and you didn't, don't blame him. Blame yourself and your agent. But beyond that, right after the documentary aired, Scottie Pippen, feeling slighted and underrated, decided to write a book where he would be able to espouse his side of things. And he said things like Michael Jordan could be condescending as a teammate. Phil Jackson was a racist. And Michael Jordan ruined basketball because everybody wanted to be like Mike, so nobody was passing. Everybody was trying to just dunk and score so they can get a shoe deal and get on ESPN. And Scottie may be right about some of these things. But then Scottie went on to say things like, "I'm just as good as Michael Jordan, and Michael Jordan wouldn't have championships without me." And the only time people say those things is when they feel as if people are underrating their skills and abilities, or they feel like they're not as good as the person they're talking about, so they have to constantly remind anyone who will listen how good they are. Case in point, I used to work with a young lady who did payroll for a company for which I worked. And whenever she got upset with anybody because someone was questioning the work that she did, maybe she made a mistake and someone was asking her about it, or maybe something didn't work out the way somebody thought it should, she viewed that as, okay, you are questioning my work. And I've worked in payroll for 13 years. And nobody cares if you've worked in payroll for 13 years, because when you're working in payroll, the only thing people care about is my paycheck correct right now? Am I being paid the amount of money I'm supposed to be paid? So whether you're a payroll genius or whether you're just somebody who learned it from a YouTube video, nobody cares as long as their check is correct. So to say, how can you challenge me on your check when I've done payroll for 13 years? Nobody cares how long you've done payroll. Do it right today so I can get paid today and so I can pay my bills today. And that's basically where I'm at with Scottie Pippen. Nobody's questioning how great you are, Scottie. The documentary was about the Bulls and it shaded towards Michael Jordan. If you want to tell the Scottie Pippen side of things, write a book, which you did, or produce your own documentary, which you have the money to do. But even with that, nobody is saying that you weren't great. Nobody is saying that you weren't as good as many of the other players who played. Maybe they're not saying you're as good as Michael Jordan. But if you listen to basketball analysts, if you listen to basketball experts, if you listen to the people whose job it is to talk about basketball, they don't think anybody's as good as Michael Jordan. Except Michael Jordan. He thinks there are people who are better than him. He believes he was the best person who ever played basketball. But he will also say that the ring is important, and he knows that he has 6 rings while Bill Russell has 11 as the centerpiece of a franchise. So he thinks he was the greatest physical specimen to ever take an NBA court. And if he didn't, there'd be no reason for him to be there. Shaq thinks he was the greatest player to ever play. Kobe thinks he was the greatest player to ever play. I'm sure Jason Kidd and Steve Nash and any of these other guys who ever played at some point thought they were the best player on the court. And you did too. But nobody ever told you you weren't. Nobody told you you were a scrub. Scottie Pippen, you were a great player. Nobody's denying that. Maybe nobody's saying you're better than Michael Jordan. Whatever. Why are you worried about that, Scottie? You were a 7-time All-Star. You were a 6-time champion. You made the All-NBA team 7 times, including one time when you didn't even make the All-Star team that year. You made the All-NBA team at the end of the season. You were 10 times All-Defense. You're on the 50th anniversary team. You're on the 75th anniversary team. You led the league in steals one year. And you won 6 championships. Nobody is saying you're a scrub. Nobody is saying that you suck. Nobody is saying that you weren't a great player. Last Dance was a documentary. It told a story based on the writers and the directors and the producers. That's what documentaries are. My vision of the story. The information that I want to cover. The information the way I see it, or the information the way I want to see it. The questions that I have as director or producer or writer that I want answered. If you've got a problem with The Last Dance, go talk to Bill Simmons. Why? Because Bill Simmons is the guy who created the 30 for 30 concept for ESPN. Go talk to Bill Simmons, see if maybe they can do a documentary on Scottie Pippen. Heck, they did a documentary on Sam Bowie. Heck, they even did a documentary on Sean Bradley. The documentary was about how Sean Bradley got dunked on a lot, being 7'6", but there was a documentary on Sean Bradley. So if you want a Scottie Pippen documentary, all you've got to do is conceive it, produce it, find a director who can shoot the thing and put the thing together, tell your side. Talk about how you came from Central Arkansas and how you grew up in basketball and how you became one of the greatest defensive players to ever play the game, and how you won 6 championships, and how it was your defense on Magic Johnson that got Michael Jordan his first championship, because Phil Jackson figured out after game 1 that Michael Jordan could not guard Magic Johnson. So he put you on Magic Johnson to slow Magic down so that the Bulls could win a championship. And once you started guarding Magic Johnson, the Bulls won all 4 games and the Lakers did win another game. Talk about that in your documentary, Scottie. But don't blame the documentary or the documentary creators for people thinking that Michael Jordan was great. Michael Jordan was already great. People already thought Michael Jordan was great. Michael Jordan even thought Michael Jordan was great. And if you don't believe him, just listen to his Hall of Fame speech. Don't blame the documentary because you feel like people think you were less than you thought you were, and you were considered to be less than you felt like you should be considered. Don't blame the documentary, because if you want to tell your story, you have enough money to tell your story. So go tell your story. The Last Dance was what it was. And now if you want to do Scottie Pippen, you can create Scottie's story. But don't blame Michael. Don't blame the documentary. Don't feel slighted. Don't write a book telling your side, where your side is basically I'm great and they weren't, or I'm great and people seem to forget how great I was. Take an honest look at your side and say, this is the story I want to tell. These are the facts as I know them. Which is, I guess, what you did in your book. You wrote the book, but you wrote the book angry. Create the documentary objectively and tell the story. Because, Scottie, the only person underrating you is you. By writing a book saying I'm just as good as Michael. By writing a book saying without me, Michael wouldn't have a championship. By writing a book saying 1994 when they wanted to put Kukoc in because of me, because I chose not to go in because I was going to be a decoy. That was a slight against me and Phil Jackson was racist. Instead of saying all that, just be honest and say, yeah, I was a key component. And I was a key component in the Bulls winning 6 championships. You never hear James Worthy saying, oh, yeah, Magic and Kareem got all the credit, but I was there too. You're not going to hear Klay Thompson going, oh yeah, everybody looked at Steph Curry, but what about me? You're not going to hear Vinnie Johnson or Joe Dumars go, yeah, everybody talks about Isaiah, but what about me? Because they know how great they are. They're in the Hall of Fame, or they will be in the Hall of Fame in the case of Klay Thompson. They're in the Hall of Fame. They're on the 50th anniversary team. They're on the 75th anniversary team. They're considered to be some of the greatest, most elite players in the history of the game. They don't need people to say, you know what, you were great. But in case I haven't told you, you were great. They don't need it. But if you need it, go tell your story. Tell people what you think. Remember to like and share this video and subscribe to this channel. And follow me on Facebook at Eric J on Sports 1 and on Instagram and Twitter at Eric J on Sports. And for Eric J on Sports, I'm Eric J, and this is what I think.